Hello and thanks for watching Proactive London. Joining me today is Natalia Beales, Executive Business Manager and Head of the Carbon Desk at SCB Group. Natalia, good to speak with you today.
Stephen, pleasure to be here and nice to speak with you too.
Well, Natalia, it's a busy time before COP26. What is the sentiment for SCB before those negotiations?
Approaching COP26, I'm very delighted to see our strengthening leadership in the biofuel and in carbon markets, while we also continue to work hard on shaping voluntary carbon markets and making them successful in driving meaningful mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. At SCB, we truly believe the voluntary carbon market has a major role to play in keeping global warming below 1.5 to 2 degrees. As we pursue a low carbon future via our activities at SCB in renewable energy and in carbon markets, we're extremely proud to announce that we have reached more than 500 million of metric tons of CO2 abated, halfway towards our goal of 1 billion metric tons of CO2 abated by 2030. So our transactions in biofuels decrease the reliance on fossil fuels and thus increase energy security, improves air quality and the environment, while our carbon transactions help to fund projects focusing on reforestation, on renewable energy, waste and water management, and carbon capturing. So we are eagerly waiting for next week to see the outcome of negotiations.
Well, among the issues that will be addressed at COP26 that have a global impact on business and different industries, which will be closely watched by SCB?
It's a good question. The COP26 will constitute a critical piece for the future development of the voluntary carbon market and the agreed framework and the rules that will govern the international carbon market proposed by Article 6 of the Paris Agreement will impact the supply and demand and subsequently the price of carbon offsets. So for us at SCB and the Carbon Desk specifically, understanding the post-COP26 supply landscape picture and any changes in carbon offsets eligibility criteria are the key moments. Of course, other key areas for us would be also carbon market mechanisms, which would allow countries to purchase carbon credits from other countries to allow the purchasing country to continue to emit within its borders, and the climate finance, which will be a critical factor for both developed and least developed countries.
Natalia, can you give an example of how the supply picture of carbon offsets can change post-COP26?
Sure. The example would be the nationally determined contributions, which are at the heart of the Paris Agreement. The limitation to trade carbon credits that exceeds the NDCs may affect the volume of credits in the market. Thus, if the voluntary market cannot satisfy the demand generated by the net zero pledges, prices will increase or continue to increase further, if I may say so. Other main issues to be discussed on the COP26, which will fall within the landscape of the supply, would be double counting of carbon credits. So the major voluntary offset program operators are yet to reach an agreement on the impact of NDC counting and so-called internationally transferred mitigation outcomes on the offsets generated by projects which fall within the country's NDCs. The ITMOs, so-called emission surplus reductions or coupons, allowing countries to transfer the financial burden of decarbonization. So next week, we just have to see if there's any mechanism which will be put in place to account for such offsets, some adjustment mechanism which will address a risk of double counting. And another issue which would fall also in the supply and demand landscape for us and for the markets also is the fate of the remaining millions and billions of old Kyoto period CDM credits. The parties will have to decide whether to allow carbon credits issued under the CDM as a part of Kyoto Protocol to also be recognized by the Paris Agreement or by the newly launched central registry. Credits issued under CDM mechanism have represented the most competitive credits available in the market. Nonetheless, their competitive prices due to the old vintages, or some of them are considered to be lower quality compared to other registries. So there's a general feel, I must say, in the market that those instruments related to the Kyoto Protocol are coming to an end, and those sentiments are supported by many statements of private companies, of universities, of NGOs, which all advocate ending all CDM projects. Also, I'd like to add here in this regard, Brazil's voice will have an impact. Brazil was one of the top countries for projects under the Clean Development Mechanism, as has in the past also argued for all those credits to be allowed to make up for pollution cuts after 2020. But reading the press in the recent days, it feels Brazil is now willing to find a compromise. So we just have to see next week.
How's the voluntary carbon market looking at the moment?
Great question. The voluntary carbon markets have been booming. Even in the absence of agreed Article 6 rules, we've seen companies and countries moving ahead, and we've seen some very healthy demands through net zero pledges and companies addressing their sustainability strategies, which wouldn't fall under the compliance schemes. In particular, in 2021, the growth in the voluntary carbon market has been astronomical. We've seen some record-breaking volumes on issuances, on retirements, in values as well. The prices have risen by 200, 300% since spring across a variety of different technologies for carbon offsets. There's also a lot happening in the standard setting and establishing of new initiatives. For example, yesterday we saw the Science Based Targets Initiative, SBTi, launching the world's first net zero corporate standard, which will provide a tool to assess corporate net zero target setting and enable corporations to align their climate strategies within limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. SBTi is encouraging companies and industries that are more difficult to decarbonize to do immediate climate action until those technologies reach more maturity, and this can be done by carbon offsets. But they should not replace the efforts in achieving deep emission cuts in their own operation. Also, members of the Sustainable Market Initiative's Financial Services Task Force, comprising of major international financial institutions and banks, released a white paper signaling support for carbon credits. The STF also recognizes that narrow zero strategies should prioritize carbon reductions ahead of purchasing voluntary carbon credits, but both actions will be necessary to achieve net zero targets. We're truly aligned with those statements at SCB as well.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what transpires at the conference next week, and I'm sure we'll be chatting to you again soon. But thank you very much for your time today, Natalia.
Thank you very much, Stephen. My pleasure.
That's Natalia Beales, Executive Business Manager and Head of the Carbon Desk at SCB Group.